I'm a tenured professor, and I want to talk about why going to graduate school will be the worst decision that you will ever make. And before I go further with this, I want you to follow along throughout the video to find out more. All right, so there are two things. The reason why you should never go to graduate school. First thing is, it's expensive. Second thing is, you're going to understand the world and realize that it's not what you thought it to be. All right, so that's it. I want to actually talk about at this moment why it's actually a really good idea. Because I know if I negate and I put things in a very negative tone at the beginning, that you're going to be more likely to actually watch this. How do we know this? This is actually from research that people understand about human beings. We understand all about this kind of stuff, right? And I can sort of think about how to encourage you to follow along by me being more personable in understanding this, by me focusing on conversations about me so that it doesn't really affect you and it doesn't feel so scary. All of these kind of things. Oh, and me also talking about, my puppies, my beautiful golden retrievers. All of these kind of things. And by the way, there's a little puppy that's coming this way, so I might have to duck around. All these kind of things. I want to talk about that because that's what you're going to understand, right? You're going to understand the sort of nuances about how things actually work. And there's a lot of stuff that you don't quite get in undergraduate education. See, I told you they're all running over there. You don't get with undergraduate education that you get with graduate education, and you understand that the world is a lot more complicated than you thought it was. And you can kind of get exposed to that when you're in undergraduate education. But then in graduate education, you get really exposed to it and you sort of understand some more of the nuances, particularly with how the research is developed. And there is a ton of not only crappy research, but it's actually really hard to do it really well. And even if you do it really well, there's all sorts of limitations and things like that you understand, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is you're going to be in a culture of negation. The whole thing is about, the scientific term, it's actually falsification. It's been around for a long time. We understood this. And it's really, what you're doing is you're actually standing up and you're telling your story, right? This is how it's going to feel. You're going to tell your story. And your story is about some research finding or something like that. And everybody's going to yell at you. And everybody's going to tell you that the idea is actually really stupid. And it is, right? And you have to figure out how I can stand up and justify what I actually said. That's really a lot more along the lines of what science actually feels like than the sort of building of scientific facts that is taught in undergraduate education. That's not really the case, because this stuff is always evolving. We always have different understandings. And so if somebody stood up and said, gravity is all fake, so scientists would actually say, hey, you know what? Maybe that's the case. Let's see what's going on, right? And if you don't have a solid idea of why it's all fake, then, we're all going to discredit you. And it's going to take a lot of work to do that. So the culture is quite negative. But that also gives you a lot of internal strength, right? And that's the thing that you begin to sort of stand up and go like, whew, I can do this. But it's going to go through a lot of personal development. And that's the thing that I wanted to go through. The second part is that there's a tremendous amount of personal development that you go through that you would never think about. So it's more akin, is a very kind of like entrepreneurial career in terms of what actually happens, right? So imagine you're an entrepreneur and you're selling ideas and you're trying to sell those ideas. That's what it's going to feel like, right? You have ideas, then you're trying to peddle, and then you're trying to sell those particular ideas to somebody else. And it's going to be really hard to do that because everybody is super skeptical, right? We've seen the snake oil salesperson before doing sort of sketchy things and all of that kind of stuff. And we're really doubtful. And every once in a while, there is somebody that does sketchy things that gets through. But for the most part, it's pretty hard to get through by doing sketchy things. There's a lot of norms that happen in the scientific community. And part of the reason what I'm trying to do with the Reciprocity Project is not only build this sort of platform to help us write. We're adding a lot more stuff coming in. If you want to go check it out, the E is written with a 3, reciprocity.com. It's kind of like a sharing economy editing platform, writing platform. That's how I got into this. I built the platform and then nobody paid attention to it. Surprise, surprise, because I was trying to be all nice, reciprocity, right? Think about that. It's all about like just trying to be nice to other people to get sort of generalized reciprocity back, karma and all of that crap. But I've learned on social media that nobody pays attention to that stuff. If you're nice, you're kind, you're generous, all that kind of stuff, nobody cares, right? But if you're kind of an antagonist and all of that kind of stuff, people pay attention to that. So anyways, my point is that we understand the sort of nuances of this. And what you're going to do and what you're going to realize is that the world is a lot more complicated than you thought. And it's not as easy to understand, both in terms of how we understand the world and what's going to happen with it. Now, the other thing that's going to happen is that we all have kind of different priorities or criteria in our life in terms of assessing, career success and all those kind of things. And you're going to have to determine what those things are for you. The quintessential criteria within the academic community is how big your house actually is. That sounds kind of stupid, but let me explain. So it's the number of publications that you actually have. And it doesn't necessarily mean the publication quality, who's reading it. There's all sorts of nuances to all this kind of stuff that's not as obvious as one would sort of think about. There's a whole massive literature on looking at the effects, both from sort of economist types and sociologist types on how science actually works and the sort of norms. It's become a huge field. And it's not what you expect it to be, but the way that we sort of measure scientists' value is by how big their house is, the number of publications that they actually have. And if you don't measure up to that, for whatever reason, right? You're in a field that's different or whatever, you're not going to be judged the same sort of way. And so you can either take that as a given and sort of play by the sort of norms of it. And there's lots of everybody knows what these sort of norms are and stuff. Or you can prioritize other things, right? And prioritize things like, the default that I always think about is like kindness and giving back and things like that, because those actually take away from research productivity. It's like, so the example I give in class is, how do you build social capital in the classroom? And how do you build, like, social capital is this really important thing that happens in organizations, and it's about sort of relationships within organizations. You know how you do it? It's very simple. Let's give birthday cakes, but that costs money, that costs time. It means people are unproductive and all of that kind of stuff. And we have to sort of think about what that means and the priorities, what that actually means in what you're doing. And so it's the same thing that happens in the academic arena, right? You have to think about, what does it mean for me to do good things? Is it just about publications or not? I don't know, right? It's your own priorities. And that's where I'm going to, and that's kind of the third thing I'm going to leave here, is think about the priorities that you have and what that actually means, right? It's going to really push you to sort of assess those priorities. It's going to become painfully clear when you do that, and what those mean to you, right? And you're going to be sort of pressed on what it means to you to do you, right? And to be yourself. And some people might choose one way, right? And some people might choose another way. None of them are really right and wrong. I get frustrated in some ways, really frustrated and really anxious and all of that kind of stuff. But, people are just living their life. And I think that's where you're going to have to sort of realize is that everybody has different incentives and morals and all of this kind of stuff. We abide by different sort of rules in our own life, and you're going to have to choose that path for you. And I think that's the key thing, is you're going to have to learn how to live your life in a much better way and take control out of your life and what it means to be you. That's it. All right, take care. Sorry about sneaking that one at the beginning on ya. Gotcha.